she whispered. I can't give you a family. The cowboy replied, Darlin, you already have one before we start the story, so tell me from where you are watching this. The wind carried the scent of dust and sagebrush as Clara Mayfield rode her weary mare down the long trail into Red Bluff, a small frontier town pressed between red mesas and open sky. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. Clara's silhouette, slight yet steady, moved against the burning sky, a lone rider with a doctor's satchel strapped to her saddle and the weight of old pain in her heart. She wasn't new to the road. For years, she'd drifted from town to town, patching wounds, delivering babies, and mending the broken with herbs and gentle words. But no matter where she went, the whispers always followed. That's the one who can't have children. People would murmur when they thought she couldn't hear. Her husband left her over it. Those words, sharper than a branding iron, had driven her deeper into solitude. She told herself she didn't mind. She didn't need anyone. Not anymore, as she rode past the weathered sign that read Welcome to Red Bluff. Clara adjusted her wide-brimmed hat to shield her blue eyes from the dust. The town was small, one main street lined with a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon, and a few wooden homes with rocking chairs out front. Life here seemed simple, maybe even peaceful. But Clara had learned peace was an illusion that vanished once folks learned your story. She dismounted outside the feed store, tying her mare to the post. Inside, the air smelled of hay, oil, and grain. A handful of townsfolk paused their conversation when she entered. It wasn't every day a woman walked in wearing trousers, a leather duster, and a gun holstered at her hip. But Clara was used to stares. She gave them a polite nod and made her way to the counter. Afternoon, she said softly to the man behind the counter, a broad-shouldered fellow with kind eyes and dust on his hat. Afternoon, ma'am, he replied, his voice low and warm. Name's Jack Hull. What can I do for you? Just passing through, she answered. Looking for a place to stay a spell. I do some healing work, herbs, salves, that sort of thing. Maybe the town could use a pair of hands. Jack's brows lifted, a spark of curiosity lighting his gaze. Healer, huh? Well, you might have just ridden into the right place. My youngest's been coughing something fierce. Doctor's been gone near 2 weeks. Clara nodded, sympathy flickering in her eyes. If you'll allow, I can take a look. I've had good luck with chest herbs. Something softened in Jack's expression. You'd do that. For a stranger? I've been a stranger in most places, she said simply, a faint smile curving her lips. Jack chuckled under his breath. You sound like someone who's seen a lot of towns. Too many, she murmured, none that ever felt like home. The words slipped out before she could stop them. She quickly turned away, pretending to study the jars of grain on the shelf. Jack said nothing, but there was something about his silence, not pity, but understanding that made her chest ache. He gave her directions to the Halloran Ranch, just outside town. You can bunk in the guest room for the night if you don't mind kids, he added with a faint smile. Kids. Clara repeated, her hand tightening on her satchel. 3 of them, he said proudly. Ben's 10, Ellie's 8, and little Sam, well, he's 5 and runs faster than a jackrabbit. Clara's heart gave a small, painful twist. Children had always been both her greatest joy and her quiet sorrow. She'd delivered dozens of babies for other women, each cry like a gift from heaven, but when her own time came, the fever took that dream away. Since then, every child's laugh reminded her of what she'd lost. Still, she nodded. I don't mind, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That night, as she rode out toward the ranch under a wide, moonlit sky, Clara told herself it was just another stop along the road, a few days of work before she moved on again. But deep inside, where she kept the parts of herself too fragile to face the world, something stirred. Perhaps it was the way the ranch lights flickered like stars against the dark. Or perhaps it was the memory of Jack's kind eyes. The first eyes in a long time that hadn't looked at her with judgment. Either way, Clara Mayfield didn't yet know that this quiet town, and one cowboy with a gentle heart, would change her life forever. The Halloran Ranch sat nestled between 2 rolling hills. Bathed in the amber glow of early morning, roosters crowed, cattle lowed in the distance, and smoke rose gently from the chimney of the big farmhouse. Clara Mayfield reined in her horse at the gate, staring for a moment at the sight before her, the kind of home she used to dream about as a child. Beyond the white fence, 3 small figures darted through the grass, chasing each other with laughter that rang clear through the crisp air. A dog barked excitedly, circling them. For a moment, Clara's heart softened. She'd seen so many homes broken by sickness or grief, and yet here, she felt warmth. Easy, girl, she whispered to her horse, patting its neck before dismounting. Before she could call out, the front door burst open, and Jack Halloran stepped out, the same broad-shouldered man from the feed store, but this time without his hat. His dark hair was mussed, his sleeves rolled up, and there was a streak of flour across his forearm. He looked every inch a man who worked hard and loved harder. Mornin', Miss Clara, he called with a grin. Hope you don't mind a little chaos. Mornings around here are lively. Clara smiled faintly. Lively's fine. I've treated worse. Just then, a little girl with freckles and a mess of blonde curls ran up, clutching a wooden doll with a missing arm. "Papa, Ben took my doll again." "I did not," shouted a boy from the porch, brandishing a stick like a sword. "She threw mud at me first." Behind them, a smaller boy, no more than 5, peered out shyly from behind the doorframe, holding a toy horse. His big brown eyes studied Clara curiously. Jack sighed, half amused, half exasperated. "And that," he said, "is Ben, Ellie, and little Sam, my whole world, and my biggest handful." Clara knelt so she was eye level with the youngest. "You must be Sam," she said gently. "That's a fine horse you've got." Sam blinked, then smiled shyly. "Pa made it for me. Did he now?" Clara glanced up at Jack. "You're a man of many trades, Mr. Halloran," he chuckled. "You do what you have to when you've got 3 young'uns and no mama to keep 'em in line." The words hung between them like a soft ache. Clara saw the flicker in his eyes, that hollow space where love and loss used to meet. She knew it well. "Your wife?" she asked quietly. "Passed 4 winters ago," he said simply, his gaze drifting toward the distant hills. "Fever took her fast. Kids were smaller then. Ellie still asks if her mama's star is the brightest one in the sky." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," he nodded. "We get by. Some days are harder than others." She looked at the children again, Ben trying to climb a fence, Ellie giggling as she chased the dog, Sam still clutching his toy horse. "You're doing fine," she said softly. "They look happy." "Most days," Jack admitted, "but they miss a woman's touch. Someone to scold them, gentle. Teach Ellie her stitching. Maybe keep this place from turning into a barn." He gave her a small, hopeful look, though he didn't say the rest aloud. "Someone to make us whole again." Clearing her throat, Clara changed the subject. "You said one of them was sick." Jack's worry returned instantly. "Sam's been coughing. Comes and goes. But last night it was bad. Feverish too." Clara's instincts took over. "Show me." Inside the farmhouse, the air smelled faintly of bread, smoke, and lavender, the remnants of a woman's touch still lingering in the corners. Clara sat beside the boy's bed and checked his pulse, his temperature, the color of his cheeks. She opened her satchel, pulling out small jars filled with herbs, marshmallow root for the throat. She murmured, mixing a paste with honey, and mullein to ease his chest. Jack stood by the door, watching in silence as she worked, his expression unreadable. When she coaxed Sam to take a spoonful and the boy smiled weakly up at her, Jack's eyes softened. "You've got a gentle hand, Miss Clara," he said quietly. "I've had 2, she replied. "Not everyone likes the taste of medicine." That earned a chuckle. He offered her coffee afterward, and they sat on the porch while the sun rose higher, golden light spilling across the fields. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt something stir in her chest, something dangerously close to belonging. Jack noticed the faraway look in her eyes. "You said you've been traveling a long time. Ever think of settling somewhere?" Clara hesitated. "Once," she said softly, "but life doesn't always agree with our plans." Jack nodded knowingly. "Maybe it's time you gave it another try." She looked out over the land, the kids laughing again, the gentle rhythm of ranch life surrounding her, and for a fleeting moment, she let herself imagine it, staying, but the thought scared her more than the road ever had. The next morning dawned soft and golden, with the faint hum of bees drifting through the wildflowers that lined the Halloran fence. Clara Mayfield was already awake, her sleeves rolled up, grinding herbs on the back porch while a kettle steamed nearby. The scent of mint and sage filled the air. She'd promised to check on little Sam, and true to her word, she rose with the sun. Inside, the farmhouse stirred to life. Laughter, the creak of floorboards, the thud of boots on wood, the sounds of a home. Clara tried not to let it warm her too much. She'd been in plenty of houses before, to heal, to help, and then to leave. That was her way. Stay too long, and hearts got tangled. Jack Halloran appeared at the doorway, hair tousled, holding 2 steaming mugs. "Coffee." Clara accepted it with a nod. "Thank you. He's sleeping easier now. Fever's broken." Jack exhaled, relief softening his face. "I owe you for that." "You don't owe me a thing," she said. "I just did what anyone would be." Gave her a knowing look. "Most anyone's wouldn't be ridden through a storm to get here last night." Clara smiled faintly. "Guess I'm not most anyone's." The air between them shifted, quiet, warm, charged with something unspoken. He looked at her like a man, seeing light after too long in the dark. But Clara quickly turned away, fussing with her herbs, pretending not to notice. She couldn't afford to let her heart wander down that path again. From inside came a sudden shriek of laughter. Ellie and Ben arguing over who got the last biscuit. Jack shook his head, amused. "You'd think they were fighting over gold." "Children usually do," Clara said softly, her eyes distant. "Every scrap of sweetness feels like treasure when you're little." Jack studied her. There was something in her tone, a faint sadness, like a song sung too many times. "You ever have little ones of your own?" he asked carefully, her hands stilled over the mortar. She hesitated. "No," she said finally, "just others I've cared for along the way." He nodded slowly, sensing the wall she'd just built. Well, mine taken a liking to you already. Ellie said if you don't stay long, she's gonna cry. Clara chuckled softly, though her heart pinched. Children are sweet that way. They attach easy. Jack smiled. You say that like it's a bad thing. Before she could answer, little Sam appeared at the door, hair tousled and eyes bright again. Miss Clara, he called, running toward her. Look what I drew. He held up a scrap of paper, a stick figure family, a tall man, 3 kids, and a woman with a long braid. That's you, he said proudly, pointing at the woman. For a second, Clara couldn't breathe. Jack's smile faltered, unsure of what to say. Clara knelt beside the boy, forcing a smile. It's lovely. Sam, you're quite the artist. He grinned, hugging her around the neck before running off to play. Clara watched him go, her throat tight. She could still feel the warmth of his tiny arms around her, something so pure, so trusting, and it terrified her. Jack leaned on the railing beside her. He don't take 2 strangers often. You've got a gift. She shook her head. No, I just know how to listen. He looked at her, then out at the land, stretching wide and golden under the sun. Ain't often someone walks in here and makes things feel right again. Clara kept her gaze on the horizon. Don't get used to it, Mr. Halloran. I don't stay anywhere long. He smiled faintly. We'll see about that. That afternoon, Clara helped Ellie with her reading lessons while Ben fetched water from the well. Jack watched from the doorway, arms crossed, that soft, faraway smile never leaving his face. For the first time in years, laughter filled the house again, the kind that came from joy, not just habit. When night fell, Clara lingered on the porch, looking up at the stars. Somewhere, deep inside, she felt the faint flicker of something she hadn't dared feel in a long while. Hope. She pressed a hand over her heart, almost as if she could quiet it. Don't start dreaming, Clara, she whispered to herself. Dreams are for folks who stay inside. Jack tucked his children into bed, then paused by the window, catching sight of her silhouette in the moonlight. Something in him, something tired, lonely, and long buried began to heal. He didn't know it yet, but that night marked the first spark between 2 hearts that had spent too long wandering alone. A soft rain fell that morning, tapping against the farmhouse windows like a lullaby. The air smelled of wet earth and coffee, and a gentle calm filled the Halloran home, the kind that comes after a long night of laughter. Clara Mayfield had meant to leave that week. She'd told herself she'd ride out once Sam's cough cleared, but each sunrise brought a new reason to stay, a new sound of joy that anchored her heart a little deeper. This morning, it was Ellie's giggle from the kitchen. No, Papa, you're doing it wrong. The girl squealed as Jack tried to braid her hair. Jack grumbled playfully, fumbling with the strands. I'm a rancher, not a seamstress. How many loops does this thing need? 3. Papa, Ellie insisted. Miss Clara does it better. Clara looked up from the herbs she was sorting on the table. The sight before her, Jack trying to braid his daughter's hair, his tongue sticking out in concentration, made her laugh out loud. Jack turned, mock offense lighting his eyes. You laughing at me, Miss Clara? Just a little, she said, still smiling. Here, let me help. He stepped aside, handing her the ribbon. Clara's fingers moved gently through Ellie's curls, the movements practiced and tender. There, she said, tying the final knot. Now you look like a princess. Ellie beamed. You should stay forever, Miss Clara. Then my hair will always be pretty. Clara froze. The innocence in the child's voice struck deep. Jack noticed the shadow cross her face and opened his mouth to change the subject. But before he could, Ben burst in from the porch, soaked and breathless. Pop, there's a calf stuck by the creek again. Jack sighed, already reaching for his hat. That fool cow's got less sense than a fence post. He looked to Clara. You mind watching them while I go? She nodded. Of course. Go on, I'll manage. Manage, he teased as he slipped into his coat. You'll have your hands full in 5 minutes. He wasn't wrong. As soon as the door shut, chaos erupted. Ellie wanted to bake. Ben wanted to whittle. Sam wanted to show off his new drawing of the family dog. Within minutes, the kitchen looked like a whirlwind had passed through. And yet, Clara was laughing, really laughing as she helped Ellie measure flour, and stopped Sam from dipping his toy horse into the mixing bowl. For the first time in years, she felt part of something. Not a visitor, not a healer, but belonging. Miss Clara, Ben asked suddenly, his voice curious. Don't you got a family somewhere? The question stilled her. She glanced at his open, honest face, then shook her head. No, Ben, not anymore. He frowned. That's sad. She forced a small smile. It used to be, not so much now. He thought about that, then shrugged and said matter-of-factly, you can be in ours if you want. Clara's throat tightened. She looked at the boy, at Ellie humming as she stirred dough, and at Sam curled up near the fire with his drawing. Her heart ached in a way she hadn't felt in years, a sweet ache that both hurt and healed. When Jack returned, rain dripping from his hat, he stopped at the door in quiet awe. His kitchen, usually noisy and wild, smelled of baking bread. The kids were calm, happy, their laughter filling the air. And in the center of it all stood Clara, dusted in flour, smiling as she wiped her hands on her apron. Well, I'll be, he murmured. Didn't know angels could cook. Clara turned, cheeks flushed. Don't start with flattery, cowboy. I just borrowed your kitchen, he said with a grin. Looks to me like it belongs to you now. Their eyes met, a silent understanding sparking between them, the kind that says you fit here. As evening fell, the family gathered at the table, Jack at the head, the children beside him, and Clara across from him. They bowed their heads for grace. Jack's deep voice, steady and warm. When he finished, he looked up, meeting Clara's gaze. It's been a long time since this table's been full, he said softly. Clara smiled faintly. Feels good, doesn't it? Jack nodded. Better than I remembered. Later, after the children were tucked in, Clara stood by the fire, staring into the flames. Jack stepped beside her, quiet. You're good for them, he said. For all of us. She looked at him, her eyes shining in the firelight. Don't say that. Why not? Because one day I'll have to leave, she whispered. Jack's brow furrowed. Maybe not, Clara. Maybe you're already home. Her lips parted, but no words came. She only turned back to the fire, pretending she didn't feel the warmth of his words settled deep inside her, like a seed taking root. The desert wind howled that night, whistling through the gaps in the barn walls like a ghostly tune. The sky above the Halloran Ranch shimmered with stars, endless and cold. Clara Mayfield sat alone on the porch steps, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, staring into the dark horizon. Inside, the house was quiet. The children were asleep. The fire had died low, and Jack's soft voice had faded after he'd read them their bedtime story. Clara could still hear little Sam's sleepy night, Miss Clara, echoing faintly in her chest. She had no right to be here, not this long, not this deep. Every day she stayed, the lie she carried grew heavier, a secret she'd hidden from everyone, one that had cost her everything once before. She looked down at her hands, rough from years of healing work, and whispered to herself, you can't let them love you, Clara. You'll just break their hearts like yours was broken. The porch boards creaked. She turned, startled, to find Jack Halloran standing in the doorway, a lantern in hand. The light painted his face in golden shadow, warm eyes, tired smile, the kind of steady strength that made her chest ache. Couldn't sleep either, he asked quietly. Clara shook her head. Too many thoughts. He stepped closer, setting the lantern down. You've been awful quiet lately. Kids are worried. Ellie asked if you were mad at her. Clara's heart twisted. No, never. She's a sweet girl. Jack studied her for a long moment, the way a man studies the sky before a storm. You've done something to this place, Clara, to me. The kids laugh again. I laugh again. You've made it feel like home. She turned away, voice trembling. Don't say that, Jack. Why not? Because I don't belong here, she whispered. Not really. He frowned, confused. You belong more than anyone I've known. Her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, clutching her shawl tighter. You don't understand. If you did, you wouldn't say that. Jack's voice softened. Then help me understand. For a long time, only the wind spoke. Then Clara drew a shaky breath, her words barely audible. Years ago, she began. I was married. His name was Aaron. We dreamed of a big family, a ranch, a life full of laughter. But a fever came through our town. It nearly took me. When I recovered, the doctor told me. She swallowed hard. He told me I'd never bear children. Jack said nothing, his eyes steady on hers. Clara continued, her voice cracking. Aaron tried to be kind, but I saw it in his eyes. The disappointment, the emptiness. A year later, he left, said he needed a wife who could give him a legacy. Her shoulders shook as she laughed bitterly. Since then, I've been a healer for other people's families, delivering babies I could never have, saving children I'd never hold as my own. Every time a child smiled at me, it was both a gift and a wound. Tears glistened on her cheeks. That's why I can't stay here, Jack. I can't give you what you deserve. I can't give your children a mother. I can't give you a family. Silence fell between them, deep, raw, and endless. The lantern flame flickered in the wind. Then, slowly, Jack stepped forward and knelt before her, his rough hands covering hers. Clara, he said softly, you fool woman, you already have. Her breath hitched. What? He smiled faintly, his eyes shining. You've given those kids more than I ever could. You've given them laughter, warmth, peace. You've given me hope again. Don't you see? Family ain't made of blood, it's made of love. She stared at him, speechless. He lifted her hand gently to his lips. You've been their mother since the day you walked through that door. And as for me, he paused, his voice breaking slightly. You've given me something I thought I'd bear it with my wife, a reason to believe again. The tears she'd held back finally fell. You don't mean that. I do, he whispered. Every word Clara tried to speak, but the lump in her throat was too thick. All she could do was look at him, this man who saw her not as what she'd lost, but for what she still had to give. When he finally stood, he reached for her hand. Come inside, Darlin. It's cold out here. For the first time in years, she didn't argue. She took his hand and followed him back into the light. Morning came, quiet and heavy with clouds. The sky above the Halloran Ranch had turned the color of iron, and a low rumble rolled across the plains. It was the kind of day that made the animals restless and the air feel tight, as if something waited to break loose. Clara stood by the kitchen window, drying her hands on her apron. Watching the storm gather, the scent of rain and earth filled the air. Behind her, Ellie and Sam played with their wooden horses on the floor, giggling every time thunder rumbled. Kate came in from the barn, hat dripping, boots caked in mud. "Wind's picking up fast," he said, hanging his coat by the door. "We'll need to bring the horses in closer and secure the chicken coop. This one's gonna be rough." Clara nodded, worry flickering in her eyes. "You should let me help." He shook his head. "No ma'am, you stay with the kids. Keep the fire warm. If this storm hits like I think it will, we'll need to be ready to hunker down." But when the first bolt of lightning cracked across the hills, Clara's heart seized. She knew these storms, dry lightning, fierce winds, they could turn deadly fast. As Jack stepped outside again, the door banged in the wind. "Be careful," she called. He gave her that steady grin. "Always am." The next hour passed in uneasy rhythm. The storm rolled over the valley like a beast, shaking the windows, roaring across the plains. Rain began to lash sideways, hard and relentless. The horses screamed from the corral, the boards of the barn groaning under the strain. Then came the smell, faint at first, but unmistakable. Smoke. Clara froze, her heart thudding. She ran to the door and threw it open. Through the sheets of rain, she saw it. Lightning had struck the far end of the field. A line of flame snaked through the dry grass, whipped higher by the wind. "Jack!" she screamed. He was already there, racing toward the barn with a shovel in one hand and a bucket in the other. But the wind shifted, driving the fire toward the outbuildings, toward the house. Clara's instincts took over. She rushed back inside. "Ellie, Sam, we have to go now." The children stared at her. "But Daddy, I'll get your father," she said firmly. "Out the back door, to the creek. Don't stop running till you're there. You hear me?" Tears welled in Ellie's eyes. "You'll come to—" Clara forced a smile. "Always." The children ran into the rain, clutching each other's hands. Clara turned back for one last look at the house, the home she'd just started to believe she could belong to. Before she sprinted toward the barn, the flames were already licking at the fence posts. The air thick with smoke. Jack was trying to free the horses, but one of the beams had fallen, pinning a mare's leg. "Jack!" she cried. He turned, coughing. "Clara, you shouldn't be here. I'm not leaving you," she shouted, grabbing a rope from the wall. Together, they heaved at the beam until it shifted just enough for the horse to limp free. Jack slapped the animal's flank. "Go." But as they turned to run, a gust of wind sent sparks swirling. The dry hay in the loft ignited instantly. Flames roared above them. "Jack!" she gasped. "The roof." He shoved her toward the door just as the rafters cracked and fell. A burning beam crashed behind them, and for a moment, everything went white. When the world came back into focus, Clara found herself on the ground, Jack's body shielding hers. He groaned, his shirt singed, his arm bleeding. "Jack, you're hurt." He coughed, pushing himself up. "Just a scratch. You okay?" She nodded, tears streaming. "We have to get to the creek." The kids together, they staggered through the storm. Rain pelting down, fire crackling behind them. They reached the creek just as the barn collapsed in a shower of sparks. Ellie and Sam ran to them, sobbing. "Daddy!" Ellie cried. "Miss Clara!" Jack pulled them close, wrapping his arms around all three. The fire's glow lit the sky like a second sunrise, painting their faces in golden red. Clara trembled against him, exhausted and soaked, her cheek pressed to his chest. "I thought I'd lost you." He kissed her hair. "You never will." And in that moment, surrounded by smoke and rain, his children clutching her hands, Clara understood. Family wasn't born of blood or name. It was built in the fire, forged in love, and sealed in survival. The storm raged on. But for the first time, Clara didn't feel lost. She felt home. The storm passed in the small hours of the night, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt almost holy. Dawn broke slowly over Red Bluff, the sky pale pink over the hills. The fire was out, the rain had done its mercy, but the Holleran ranch stood scarred. The barn was gone, blackened, timbers and smoke, still curling faintly into the air. Clara woke where she had finally fallen asleep, sitting against a willow by the creek. Her clothes were still damp, her body aching, but her arms were wrapped around little Sam, who snored softly against her shoulder. Across the creek, Jack stood by what remained of the barn, his silhouette motionless, shoulders bowed beneath the weight of what he'd lost. Clara gently set Sam down, tucking her coat around him, then rose and crossed the wet ground to where Jack stood. The air smelled of ash and rain, and her boots squelched in the mud. He didn't turn when she approached. "I built this barn when Mary was still alive," he said quietly. "Every board, every nail. She used to sit out here while I worked, sewing baby clothes for Ben." Clara's chest ached. "I'm sorry, Jack." He nodded slowly. "Lost Mary, lost the barn, almost lost the kids last night. If it hadn't been for you." His voice trailed off, rough and tired. She laid a gentle hand on his arm. "You didn't lose everything, Jack. You still have your children. You still have this land. And you have people who care about you." He looked down at her then, his eyes a storm of exhaustion and something deeper. "You saved them," he said softly. "You saved us." Clara tried to smile, but her lip trembled. "They're good kids. They didn't need saving, just someone to show them where to run." He shook his head. You were brave, Clara. You stood in fire for folks you barely knew. That's more than I ever expected from anyone again. For a long moment, they stood together in silence, the morning sun warming the wet earth. Behind them, Ellie's laugh broke through the stillness, a light, sweet sound that made Jack's eyes soften. I should check on them, Clara said, her voice low, but as she turned to go, Jack's hand caught hers. Wait, she froze, the air between them still and charged. I ain't good at talkin' feelings, he said, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. But when that storm hit, I thought I was gonna lose everything all over again. Then I saw you, running through the fire like an angel, too stubborn to let us go. And I knew, I ain't supposed to lose you too. Her breath caught. Jack. He took a step closer, his voice gentle. I don't care what you think, you can't give. I don't care about the past or what folks say. You belong here, Clara, with us. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't understand, she whispered. I can't give you more children. I can't give you a family. Jack smiled, then that slow, quiet smile that reached his eyes. Darlin, he said softly, you already have one. The words hit her like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Her heart, so long locked behind walls of pain and pride, finally cracked open. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself rest, even if it was just for a little while. Her voice trembled. You'd really want a woman like me, broken in ways that can't be fixed. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You ain't broken. You're just strong in places most folks never had to be. My kids already love you, Clara, and if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you believe you're enough. The tears she'd held back for years finally fell, soft as the rain that still dripped from the eaves. She leaned into him, her forehead against his chest, the steady beat of his heart grounding her. I don't know how to stay, she whispered. Everywhere I go, I tell myself not to put down roots. It hurts less that way. Jack wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Then let this be the first place you stop, Runan. We'll take it one sunrise at a time. For the first time in years, Clara didn't argue. She just nodded, her voice barely audible. All right. Behind them, Ben called out that the horses had wandered back. Ellie shouted that she found one of Jack's old tools in the mud. Sam ran barefoot through the puddles, laughing like the storm had never come. Clara looked at them at the wild joy of survival, at the warmth of life returning, and she smiled through her tears. Jack followed her gaze, his hand finding hers again. Looks like we got some rebuilding to do, he said softly. Clara squeezed his hand. Then let's start. And as the morning light spread over the ranch, washing away the last of the smoke, Clara Mayfield realized something she'd never dared to believe. Sometimes, family finds you even when you've given up on finding it yourself. The days after the storm were filled with hard work and quiet healing. Smoke still clung faintly to the air around Holleran Ranch, but the land itself seemed determined to start anew. The hills were green again from the rain, and wildflowers pushed through the blackened soil as if to prove that even burned earth could bloom. Clara Mayfield stood beside the ruins of the barn, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair tied back beneath her hat. Her hands were blistered from hauling wood and sweeping debris, but she didn't complain. It felt good, real, to build something instead of running from something. Across the yard, Jack Holleran hammered a new frame together with Ben by his side. Each strike of the hammer echoed steady and sure, a rhythm that reminded Clara of a heartbeat. The boy mimicked his father's movements, proud and eager, and Jack laughed every time Ben dropped a nail. You're getting the hang of it, Jack said. By the time we're done, you'll be the best builder in Red Bluff. Ben grinned. You think Miss Clara will stay long enough to see it finished? Clara froze mid-step, her cheeks warming. Jack's hammer stilled. He looked toward, her eyes soft. I reckon she just might, he said. She turned away, pretending to busy herself with a pile of lumber, but her heart was fluttering like a trapped bird. By noon, the sun was high, and sweat glistened on everyone's foreheads. Ellie brought out cool water in a bucket, while Sam toddled behind her with two mismatched tin cups. Clara crouched down to help him pour without spilling. Well now, she said, smiling, that's some mighty fine work, Mr. Sam grinned, his face sticky with dirt. Daddy says I'm a cowboy now. Clara chuckled. You sure are, the bravest one I've ever met. He puffed his chest proudly, and Ellie tugged at Clara's sleeve. Miss Clara, can we help too? Clara brushed a strand of hair from the girl's face. Of course, sweetheart, there's always room for another set of hands. The children followed her as she showed them how to gather the smaller boards, their laughter filling the air between the sound of hammering and the call of birds returning after the storm. For the first time in a long while, the ranch didn't feel haunted by loss, it felt alive. That night, after supper, the five of them sat around a small fire near what used to be the barn. The stars came out bright and endless, reflected in the creek nearby. Clara's hair shone silver under the starlight, and Jack watched her quietly as she told the children stories about the constellations, how travelers used the stars to find their way home. Ben pointed upward. Which one's yours, Miss Clara? She hesitated, then smiled softly. I don't think I've ever had one. Jack spoke up, his voice low and warm. Then we'll give you one. Clara blinked at him, startled. He nodded toward the sky. That bright one there, right over the cottonwoods. From now on, that's Clara's star. It don't matter where you go, Darlin. You'll always have a place in our sky." Her throat tightened. "Jack, you don't have to." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "I want to." For a long moment, neither spoke. The children had drifted to sleep by the fire, Ellie's head resting on Clara's lap. Sam curled up beside Jack. The night hummed softly with crickets and wind. Jack looked across the flames at her. "You know," he said slowly, "when Mary passed, I thought I was done with built houses, barns, dreams, all of it. But you came along and reminded me some things are worth rebuilding." Clara's eyes shimmered. "You give me too much credit." He shook his head. "No, man. You gave my kids their laughter back. You gave this land hope. You gave me a reason to look forward again. If that ain't family, I don't know what is." Her lips parted, but no words came. All she could do was stare into his steady eyes and feel the warmth of something stronger than gratitude, something she'd locked away long ago. Finally, she whispered, "Jack, what if I'm too late to start over?" He smiled, slow and certain. "Then we'll start late together." The fire crackled softly between them, the stars wheeling above. Clara looked down at Ellie, sleeping peacefully on her lap, and then at Sam, who had one small hand resting against Jack's arm. She realized she wasn't on the outside looking in anymore. She was part of this circle, this fragile, beautiful thing they were building out of love, sweat, and second chances. She leaned closer to Jack, her voice a tender murmur. "Then I reckon I'm stingin', Cowboy." He tipped his hat slightly, a grin breaking through the quiet. "Best news I've heard all week." And under that endless western sky, with the ashes of the past behind them and the promise of tomorrow ahead, Clara Mayfield made her silent vow to build not just a barn, but a life, a home, a family she never thought she'd have. The weeks that followed were full of quiet joy. The new barn rose taller each day, framed by laughter and the sound of hammering. Wildflowers bloomed along the creek again, and the Holleran Ranch, once marked by loss, now felt alive with second chances. Clara Mayfield moved through it all like a woman waking from a long dream. She cooked with Ellie, tended herbs by the window, helped Ben with his lessons, and taught Sam to whistle through his missing front tooth. Every evening, she and Jack walked the fence line together, their talk easy, the silence between them softer than it used to be. But beneath all her smiles, Clara carried a quiet fear, one that grew heavier the happier she became. She'd built her life around moving on before people learned too much. Staying meant opening herself to being known, and being known meant risking heartbreak. One golden evening, as the sun dipped low and the smell of cedar and earth hung sweet in the air, Jack called her out behind the half-built barn. "Got something to show you?" he said with a secretive grin. Clara followed, curiosity flickering. "You're smiling like a boy with a surprise." He laughed. "Maybe I am." When they reached the far post, she saw it, carved carefully into one of the new beams. Her breath caught. It read, "Holleran Mayfield Ranch," her name right there beside his. She blinked up at him, words failing her. "Jack, what is this?" He removed his hat, holding it against his chest. "It's what I hope this place'll be ours. Not just mine and the kids, yours too." "Jack, he stepped closer, voice low, steady. "I don't got much fancy to offer. No big house, no silver rings. Just this land, these kids, and a heart that's been yours for a while now." The world seemed to still around them, the wind through the grass, the rustle of birds settling for the night. Clara could barely breathe. "Jack, you can't mean." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a leather cord, threaded through a silver button, old, worn, smooth, with time. "This belonged to my late wife," he said softly. "She'd want me to give it to the woman I love, next. She told me before she passed, if someone ever made me laugh again, I should take the chance." Clara stared at the simple token glinting in the evening light. Her heart swelled and ached all at once. "Jack, you don't understand," he smiled, taking her trembling hands in his. "Then help me understand. Clara Mayfield, will you stay? Will you make this home your own?" For a heartbeat, she couldn't speak. Every part of her wanted to say yes, but the old fear, sharp and cold, cut through her joy. She pulled her hands free, stepping back. "Jack, I can't." His face fell, confusion shadowing his eyes. "You don't want me." Her voice broke. "I do, more than I should, but there's something you don't know about me. Something I should have told you long ago." Jack's jaw tightened slightly, but his tone stayed gentle. "Then tell me." She turned away, staring out at the horizon, the same horizon she'd chased for years. "You know I can't have children. The fever took that from me. But what I didn't tell you is, I was married once. Years ago." Jack's brows lifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "He was a soldier." She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kind, good, until the fever came. He died, and so did the baby we never got to meet. And after that, I couldn't stay anywhere that reminded me of what I lost." Tears filled her eyes. "I wandered, trying to heal others so I didn't have to face my own pain. But I should have told you the truth. You and your children deserve more than a woman with ghosts." Jack was silent for a long time, his gaze steady. Then he took a slow step toward her. "Clara," he said softly, "look at me." She did, reluctantly. bracing herself for pity or disappointment. But what she saw was neither. Jack's eyes were warm, steady as the sunrise. You think I don't know about ghosts? I've lived with them too. You think Lucin makes you unworthy? Darlin, it makes you real. She shook her head, voice trembling. I don't want to hurt you, Jack, or your children. You already healed us, he said simply. You brought life back to this place. You brought me back. And as for that fever and what it took, that don't change how much heart you've got left to give. Her tears fell freely now. But I can't give you more children. He reached up, brushing a tear from her cheek. Clara Mayfield, I've already got 3 wild ones that call you Miss Clara and look at you like you hung the moon. I don't need more. I just need you. The world blurred around her. All she could see was the man standing before her, eyes full of unshakable truth. Slowly, she stepped back into his arms. I'm scared, Jack. He held her close, his voice rough with tenderness. Then we'll be scared together. But I'm done living half a life. Stay, Clara, please. And for the first time, she didn't run. She leaned into him, into the safety, the warmth, the promise of belonging, and whispered, all right, cowboy, I'll stay. The following spring came early to Red Bluff, bringing wildflowers to the hills and songbirds back to the cottonwoods. The land that had once burned under storm fire now bloomed again, bright, alive, and full of promise. On the morning of the wedding, the sun rose over the Hollerin ranch like a blessing. Dew shimmered on the fence rails, the creek sparkled in the light, and the air carried the scent of fresh lilacs Clara had planted months before. She stood in front of the small mirror inside the ranch house, smoothing down the folds of her soft cream dress. It wasn't new. Ellie had found it tucked away in a chest from Jack's late wife, but Clara had mended it with her own hands, stitching love into every seam. Her hair was loosely braided, wild curls framing her face. When she looked at herself, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the lonely traveler, the wandering healer. This woman's eyes were steady, her heart full, her feet rooted in the red earth of home. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Come in, Clara said softly. The door creaked open, and Ellie peeked inside, holding a small bundle of wildflowers tied with a blue ribbon. PA said you might need these. Clara knelt, smiling as she accepted them. They're beautiful, Ellie. The little girl grinned shyly. Pa picked the blue ones. He said they matched your eyes. Clara's throat tightened. Did he now? Ellie nodded. He said you're the prettiest thing this side of the Rio Grande. Clara laughed softly, tears stinging her eyes. That sounds like your father. Ellie's expression grew serious then. Miss Clara, does this mean you're my ma now? Clara hesitated, emotion catching in her chest. She cupped the girl's face in her hands. If you'll have me, sweetheart, I'd be the luckiest woman in the world to be your ma. Ellie's eyes filled with tears, happy, shining ones, and she threw her arms around Clara's neck. I already do. Outside, the ranch yard had been cleared for the ceremony. Ben stood proudly beside his father in a clean shirt and 2 big boots. Sam toddled around chasing a butterfly, his laughter bubbling through the spring air. A handful of townsfolk had come to folks from Red Bluff Hood. Once eyed Clara warily, but now spoke her name with warmth. When Clara stepped out onto the porch, every head turned. Jack looked up from where he stood beneath the cottonwoods, and for a moment, time stopped. He'd dressed simply, black vest, white shirt, clean hat, but it was the look in his eyes that stole her breath. Lord, woman, he said softly as she approached, his voice full of wonder. You could outshine the sunrise. Clara smiled through trembling lips. You clean up pretty good yourself, cowboy. Laughter rippled through the small gathering. The preacher, a kindly old man from town, began to speak, his voice gentle and deep. Love, he said, isn't just born in blood, it's made in the choosing the daily kindness, the quiet faith, the standing together when storms come. Jack reached for Clara's hands, his calloused fingers warm against hers. You sure you're ready for this? He whispered, teasing but tender. She met his gaze, steady and sure. Jack Hollerin, I was ready the moment you told me I already had a family. His smile broke wide, eyes glistening. Guess I did say that, didn't I? The preacher nodded to Jack, who reached into his pocket and pulled out the same silver button, now polished, tied to a band of braided leather. It ain't gold, Jack said, slipping it onto her finger, but it's strong. Like you. Clara's tears fell freely. It's perfect. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jack didn't wait for permission. He lifted her into his arms and kissed her beneath the cottonwoods. The children cheering, the horses neighing from the pasture as if the whole land approved. Ben whooped. Ellie clapped, and little Sam tugged at Clara's skirt, proudly shouting, we got us a ma now. Everyone laughed, even Clara, though her laughter was tangled with tears. She knelt to gather all 3 children into her arms. You already had one, she whispered, echoing Jack's words. Jack wrapped his arms around them all, his voice rough with emotion. Reckon I'm the luckiest man alive. Later, as the sun sank low and music drifted from the porch, Jack and Clara danced slow in the golden light. The ranch glowed, rebuilt, reborn, alive with love. You still scared? Jack asked quietly, his lips near her ear. Clara smiled, her cheek against his shoulder. A little, but not of staying, only of waking up and finding this was all a dream. Asterisk, he held her tighter. Then I'll keep reminding you, it's real. Every sunrise, every storm, every laugh. The horizon flamed with color, painting them both in gold dot, and for the first time in forever, Clara Mayfield Halloran didn't feel like she was passing through.